Hey. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Jason. Awesome. Hoping folks can unmute. I know we have others that are joining us in the waiting room. We're going to go ahead and let them in. Welcome in. And thank you all so much for being here. Um, this is our healthcare pod. As all of you have given us great feedback on areas that you're interested in, it's been really awesome to see not only how many of you are pre-med, right, or on the pre-med track, but also in general, how many of your interests come down to impacting healthcare broadly, right? And that's why we're very excited to have our panelists and in general to have this conversation with you folks, right? I think that more than healthcare, you're going to hear from our panelists about it's okay not to have everything figured out. Life is about pivots, life is about keeping things exciting and accepting new challenges. So that's why we're really excited to have this conversation about healthcare, of course, but as all of our mentor pods go, we start to get much deeper than that.
hmm And I think what is amazing about today's panelists is that they all have a very unique interest in working with InnovateHer students and have been longtime supporters of InnovateHer. Our panelists are all supporters and looking forward to connecting with our students. So this conversation means a lot, and especially because these panelists are all close friends and we've been able to watch their journeys up close, both professionally and personally. And what we love about today's panel is that you're going to have the opportunity to hear from people who represent very different sides of healthcare. I think for a lot of
Mhm.
our students, when we talk to you guys, you talk about not knowing all of the different areas. Like you think you might have an interest in healthcare, but don't necessarily know what that means.
Yep.
So today we're going to have an opportunity to highlight clinical care, surgery, entrepreneurship, systems and operations, and take a very different look at past, but also how it's all part of a very similar ecosystem. So, as you learn today, I encourage you to think about what resonates with you and to not compare yourself to anyone's path or timeline and just taking in the different stories.
Exactly. Thanks for saying that, Cheryl. Because again, I think especially right, as our folks, the great thing about healthcare, right, and the many impacts that our panelists have been able to have in their various aspects, right? I think it's also about making sure that folks understand that that path is not linear. So we're really excited to have all of our panelists here. And again, to have all of you sharing in this and being able to ask your questions. And again, hear from folks that have been where you are, have felt how you feel, have had to navigate in spaces, right, where folks don't look like them. And yeah, we're just excited to again have this conversation. Um,
So
oh,
maybe
go ahead, Cheryl.
no, I was going to note maybe to go ahead and get us started with our first question. We'd love to hear a little bit from each of you, maybe starting with Dr. Ashley, in terms of if you could share a little bit more about your personal and academic journey, and then what do you do, your current role? Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, I would love to. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I am a nurse practitioner here in Los Angeles. I came into, well, first of all, I'm 41 years old, soon to be 42. And out of the many things that I do, my proudest role is being the mother to a 5-year-old precocious young man named Yao. That's what I do in my free time is play with him. But I came into healthcare sort of as an adult. It was not something I had planned on doing. I lived abroad. I worked as a medical interpreter, and I just so happened to be back in the United States, and I was taking a lot of jobs in the pediatric intensive care unit. And so once I was spending so much time in the hospital system, I really started to become very impressed with the bedside nursing staff and as I was already sort of in a career, this would be something that was my second career. And so I was thinking, how can I get into healthcare? What is a good entry point for someone who is already in their 20s and sort of looking to start? So I went to nursing school. And just sort of gave it a shot. I really enjoyed it. I started with an associate's degree. I went back and got a bachelor's, did a master's, then a postmaster's, then a doctoral program. After I had about 8 years of experience, I went to become a nurse practitioner, and I always worked in the intensive care unit and trauma. That was sort of where my passion was. But also, as I grew in my practice, I started to have new interests and eventually started my own practice after COVID. So, currently, I am the co founder of the Hollywood Hair and Aesthetic Institute, which is in Los Angeles and Westchester. And I also helped to start an organization that cares for certain eye afflictions. One is called pterygium and then cataract surgery. So it's sort of an outpatient practice just for surgical intervention. And it's essentially starting those practices got me into the business and entrepreneur side of medicine. So starting those, and then I also started to help other organizations who were interested in bringing those lines of service into their practices. And so I serve on advisory boards and other practices as well.
And what don't you do is the real question.
Right.
Thank you for that intro. Like I think very well rounded, but we'll get more into the work that you're doing. Let's maybe move on to Lachey if you want to share more about your work and who you are.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Lauren, Jason, hello. My name is Lachey Tennyson. I have been in healthcare forever at this point. During undergrad, I was an ophthalmic technician. I did that to support college needs. So I've always kind of fallen in this realm of healthcare. I started my career at an organization called the Joint Commission. I was very intentional about working for this organization because it felt like the golden standard for care, right? So for hospital or behavioral health or ambulatory care facilities, at one point the Joint Commission monopolized the healthcare, right? There are many other accreditory opportunities now, and so I worked there, and it was very intentional because I wanted to be a healthcare business person, right? And I know I also wanted to help healthcare, right? And so I've done that work. I've been in many genres of healthcare. I've also worked in revenue cycle. And while at the Joint Commission, I will say I found my niche in change management and process improvement. So I got a couple of certifications there. And then at that point, I was like, I can do this anywhere, right? And so I got interested a bit in this opportunity in revenue cycle for an 11 hospital system hospital, and thought, wow, this is a lot. Just so much I learned about revenue cycle, and was so immersed and ready to do something different. So I did that for a couple of years. Then I worked for a hospital, Cedar-Sinai Hospital. And while at Cedar-Sinai Hospital, I did a lot of improvement work, right? Operational improvements. And did that for a while, enjoyed it. So I'll say, like maybe our parents or my parents would stay at a job and stay there for 45 years, like my dad did, right? Feel free to move around. I've learned every time I've moved,
Ooh.
I've gotten nice increases. Okay. All right. So I've done that. And so I found myself back in revenue cycle. This organization was going through a turnaround time. I was recruited to help with that turnaround, just to offshore and globalize the organization, to make sure also in doing so that we were improving processes as we were offshoring the work to our global partners. So that's what I do. I enjoy it. Today was a very stressful day, but most days I enjoy the work that I do. But in this realm of process improvement, it is really, regardless of the genre, there's a space for it, right? I'm sure in Dr. Ashley's office and Dr. Nikki's office, there's a space to improve. So if you're improving how we fight insurance companies to pay us what we are due, or if you are improving that our tools are in a place when you would need them and sorted well so that the procedure goes well, there's always a space to improve. And so it's just engineering those processes to make sure we're giving the patients the best care. That's if it's money, because that can impact patients' experience with healthcare, or it's if they're direct health as well. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll pass it back over to you, Ivana and Cheryl.
Thanks so much, Shay. And then, of course, we have Dr. Nikki. Oh, you're muted, friend.
I'm so old. Okay.
No worry. We do that.
Um, so hello, I'm so appreciative to be here. I to tell a little bit about me. I thought I was supposed to put together some pictures, so I put together some pictures. I'm just gonna do it. I wasn't sure if I was gonna
Yeah.
do it, but
Let's
I'm
do
just
it,
gonna do it.
please.
I let's see. I'm gonna share my screen. And this is like, I don't know. I tried to eliminate anything that looked particularly gross. Um,
Let's see it.
can you
These are
see? Oh,
pre-med, med interested folks. We can take it.
okay, but hold on. You're seeing the weird view. Let me do this one more time. I'm sorry, guys. How do I, not the presenter view, but the, let's see. All right, if this isn't working.
No, take your time.
I have too many screens here is the issue. Can you guys see my screen or no?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. I don't know what you can see, but
We can see slide 1 of 8.
okay. All right. We're just gonna go with it.
Okay.
Even though I think you can see all the stuff on the bottom, but that's fine. Um, so I went, can't say it's a traditional route. I took a year off between undergrad and medical school, but I always kind of knew I wanted to be in medicine. I went to Wake Forest University for undergrad. I had a lot of fun in undergrad. Probably should have studied a little bit more, but here we are. Um, Let's see. I studied abroad. This is me in Semana Santa in Dominican Republic. This is their Holy Week, and it's typically characterized by large masks and this weird thing where they hit you with these inflated balloon-like things. But I had fun and I enjoyed myself, and that's the moral of the story: is that you can do both. You can be focused on achieving a goal, but also enjoying the process. Because whatever you decide to do, it's more than likely going to be a very long process. In addition to that, I was on the dance team at Wake Forest. We had a varsity dance team. I actually was thinking about including a slide, but our team won the national championship this year. So I'm proud of that. But that was me at a football game. I don't know who we were playing, but way back when. I I too am getting ready to celebrate a birthday. So this was like a really long time ago, but you know the journey is the journey, and I was once where you guys were, and definitely enjoyed myself. From there, I went to medical school. I should have included pictures from medical school, but I completed medical school at Howard University. Yeah, this is undergrad at Howard University. in Washington, D.C. As I mentioned before, I took a year off, studied for the MCAT, which is the entrance exam, worked on some research projects, and also enjoyed, being young. And I lived in New York City, so I enjoyed that. From there, I went into residency. Um, or after medical school, I went into residency. I knew that I wanted to go into a surgical subspecialty. At the time, I was interested in surgery. I was also interested in orthopedic surgery. And I wound up matching in general surgery, unsure where I was going to go from there, but I included tried to cut out the like really gross parts, but this is me. This was actually a gunshot wound to the chest in trauma surgery that we had to open up. But I enjoyed myself. I learned a ton. It's a really long road. Lots of hours. Our shifts could be as long as 36 hours straight, and you could do that up to every other day. So there were times that didn't get to sleep a whole lot, but learned a lot. Got to do some really cool things. Um, and I think Ivana was mentioning that you will be in environments where people don't always look like you. That was for sure the case for me a lot. Sometimes they do look like you, and that was also equally as fun and enjoyable to be with other residents. These were some of my junior residents, and when the team's got a lot of melanin, there's a little bit of special energy in the room, so that's always enjoyable. I ultimately left residency and completed a fellowship in hand surgery. Decided that I wanted to subspecialize in hand surgery as a niche, and so now I do. That's pretty much all I do in my main job, I should say. This is a microscope that I use when I'm doing what we call microsurgery and reattaching very small nerves and blood vessels in the hand. So that's me doing that. In addition to my quote unquote day job, I also run an organization in LA. It's a chapter of Black physicians, the LA chapter of the National Medical Association. This was my inauguration year and a little over a year ago. But we are motivated by supporting our communities, supporting physicians and their professional development, as well as mentorship and really just supporting us through the lifespan of our career. So that is something that I do on the side. As you can probably see in this picture, there's a little something brewing in my tummy, and I too, along with most of the ladies on, we are moms. So I guess this is my real job. This is my chubby cheeked baby Lennox.
The sweetest.
We're all huge fans.
Yeah.
But thanks for saying that, Nikki. And I mean in general, right? Each of you drop gems, and I'm like dying to get to questions. Um, but I think it's really important, right, to call out that you are all moms, right? And you all, of course, included that in your intros and just about you. So I think, for our panelists and our students, it's always important to call that out, right? And to notice that you guys have lots of responsibilities, right? But we'll get to some questions about how do we balance it all, right? Students always want to hear about that. But going back to an original question that Cheryl started to get at, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your day to day, right? I know each of your days, it sounds like because you're involved in so much are so different, but just to give our students a sense of in each of your pathways, right? What could that possibly look like for them? Um, so we can start. Nikki, you're already unmuted if you wanted to start.
Okay, sure. So, my day to day now is pretty regular, kind of 9 to 5 ish. I see patients in the office. As I mentioned, do primarily hand surgery. Probably about 95% of my day is hand surgery. So these are patients that come in for either trauma, like they broke their hand, wrist,
Mm.
finger, or cut something, or had an infection, or it could be something like carpal tunnel. And, now everybody sits in front of a computer or they're on their phones and they do all sorts of crazy things to their hands and do those things repetitively. I see a lot of patients who get injured at work. So, folks from like Amazon or factory workers. So that's the majority of my day. Today was my operative day. So I was in the operating room today. I had three surgeries this afternoon. So there's, a balance of that. My surgeries typically on average are less than an hour. Sometimes they're more. Today, I think I had two really quick ones that were, 30 minutes to an hour, and then one that was a little longer, an hour and a half. I try to balance my life, be able to be home every night with my baby, and spend some time with my friends and my family. So those are things that are important to me. So I set up my practice to be able to prioritize that.
Thanks.
I can go next.
Yeah,
Thanks, Shay.
perfect.
I don't mind. Yeah. So I feel really bad. I didn't mention that I have little people that's attached.
That's the joy of knowing you, friend.
It was implied.
Like when you said it, I just laughed like I'm the one who did it. Anyway, I do have two little ones, 11 and 12. And they are a little younger, a little older than Dr. Nikki and Dr. Ashley's baby. So maybe that's why I don't know. But I love them. I love them. It's a balancing act, I'll say that. But a day-to-day for me, so I'm responsible for 5 different departments. Um, one of those departments is a project management organization. Another one of those departments is a quality team, the training team. I have a team that sits and who take care of our mail, right? Processing our claims through mail outside of Kennesaw, Georgia, that actually sent in an office, and we had to move them outside of that office. So the operations of that is wild because that physical office is closing, but not the work. And then I also am responsible for the state certification and enrollment team to make sure that our 3,500 clinics on the domestic side remain validated and certified. And so my day to day, it varies, right? It looks different every day. I do have managers, but a lot of the strategic work falls on me, and I enjoy when I can do that. However, there are days when I just have to get dirty with the team, right? And I appreciate that because I let them know I'm not a leader that just push the work, but I support getting the work done. And oftentimes I'll call like some of my frontline staff and get really nervous. And I'm like, don't get, it's just me, right? But I do that intentionally because I want them to know, one, that I'm in this with you. So if I see that you struggled in a meeting, I'm calling you directly, not to reprimand and say what you could have done differently, but to really support you in the next meeting, so that you show the data and you show where the gaps are. One piece of the work that I'm focusing on now that is a heavy lift is globalizing more of our inventory offshore. Why that's difficult is a lot of transformation, understanding our India team or our Manila, Philippines team. But also it's going to be, people will lose jobs, right? And so that doesn't feel good to me, right? And regardless of how I convince myself of the strategy and how we can scale, for every one employee here, we have 70 there, it still doesn't feel good to me. And so, or the amount of money we can save, that doesn't feel good to me. So one thing that I'm really pushing our executive leadership team to think of is, if you're saying treat everybody with dignity, what does that look like, right? And build that into this timeline, right? Still doesn't feel good, but it comes with the territory of just making sure that people feel appreciated in this transition. And I'll say this one last piece, and it just shows how I really make sure I'm connecting with people and the work that I do. When I joined the team, the morale was super low because we had just did a major globalization. And so I created and formed a employee engagement team. And so with that team, it gives me the opportunity to do creative things, fun things. So usually people who join the team is thinking of fun. So we do hopper tours where we've gone to safari tours collectively in Africa, all online, virtual. And we've gone to Italy together as a team. So I have maybe about 600 people join those calls. I think 673 was the most people on the call. But it just steps away from the day-to-day hustle to just really saying, these are people who one just really here to make a living and take care of their families like we all are, right? So just making sure that I'm being intentional with connecting with folks and teammates, regardless of their title.
Wow. Shay, thank you so much for saying that. And I think it really illustrates the point for all of you, just because y'all are my friends, but being able to know that you all very much bring humanity into your work, not only like bedside manner, but being able to interact with those that you are leading, but those that you are taking care of as well. So thank you for saying that point, because I think so often students think about going into healthcare and sometimes don't always have the best role models in terms of like knowing you can make money, but not really knowing if they're going to like it or if they're going to enjoy the people aspect of it. So appreciate you sharing that part of it. And sorry, Ash, please go ahead and share your thoughts.
Of course. Um, I would say in line with what Dr. Perez said, I try to fit, I'm very busy. My day-to-day is jam-packed from start to finish. I'm very much like a 15-minuter, like what can I get done in this quarter of an hour? But I also build it around my child who has to eat and go to school and get dropped off, and I try to work that in. So I would say my day to day, usually I wake up early. I'm like try to get up 4:30, and I like to do something that is mentally taxing for me. Usually if that is as an entrepreneur, I'm always looking into new business interests, or perhaps, you fill so many hats in your organization, and so you might be looking into new phone systems, new charting systems. I like to do things that I can't do during the day, because once patient care starts, my brain is just pretty taxed by the end of the day. So I usually spend an hour or so doing that. Might run to the gym, see some of my good friends there. And then I go to my office, and I usually have a hair transplant in the morning. Those can vary anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to 12 hours, depending. But my part of the procedure usually lasts about 4 hours or so. So I do that. And then while the rest of the procedure and the hair is being sort of put in, I see aesthetic patients, consultations, post-op patients, and I have a big chunk of the afternoon taking meetings and seeing patients in the office. And then I run to pick my son up, spend some time talking to him on the way home, and then I don't usually have to do bedtime, but then I usually start doing some more work. So if I'm looking into a new business or other things, I usually do that sort of maybe reading a medical journal, spending time with friends. I try to reserve the evening for something that's really valuable for me, that is going to sort of keep adding value and building blocks to my life as I progress in my career.
Mhm. And I thank you for saying that, Dr. Ashley, because what we love to be able to showcase to students is the ability that all of you really shows your ability to multitask and balance and having it all, maybe not all at the same time, but really being able to like flex your time and have a little bit of everything. Um, I think for a lot of our students right now, some have a very clear idea of the direction that they want to go in, but a lot of our students may be questioning or unsure, or maybe not have anybody in their family, in their neighborhood who has gone down this route. So it can be a little scary. So for our students who are feeling unsure about their exact path, what advice would you give them to keep moving forward? And again, our students range from first year students at college. Some are getting closer to graduation. We have a couple of high school students I know as well. So anything you can share in terms of advice that you might share for them?
You want to go, Dr. Ashley?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick. I listen, I say this now to my 11 and 12-year-old because it is very important. Don't do it for the money. Okay? Now, I think my husband said, clear his throat. Listen, I I make a very decent salary. Okay. Okay. But if I had to do this and not enjoy it, I would be miserable. Right. So I remember Deepak Chakra's had a book that I read on the 7 spiritual laws of success, like back in the early 2000s, right? Y'all are young. And in that book, he talked about his experience of teaching his children, don't do it for the money. Like, what are you passionate about? So college may not be the career path. I was raised by my grandmother, who had to drop out of middle school to pick cotton. Okay. Okay. So I'll just give you that as a perspective. So I didn't see anybody do what I'm doing. Okay. And so she is something that she would just really instilled in me as well is, hey, it is important that you love what you do. Right. So when you get up and do it, it doesn't feel like work. Now, is it annoying sometimes? Absolutely. And when people say, do you love your job? I'm like, it's labor, right? If I'm traveling to India or if I'm traveling to Manila to do whatever, I'm away from my children. It's an experience, but I'm away from my family, right? So, but I love it. If I didn't love it, I would just be miserable. So don't do it for the money. Make good money, okay, right? But don't let that be your prime focus.
That's really great advice. We always say that as well, right? Like if you lean into your talents, right, your God-given talents, it's not going to feel like work. Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
And I would say those are really good points. You definitely have to love it because as the day to day, when you first start something, it's exciting, but then as the day to day comes, it gets harder and harder to do if you don't have a real joy for it. But I think there's two things as well that I would say is one, when you're in it, especially when you're first starting, you're young. And when I talk to a lot of college students, they feel so much pressure and it almost feels like you're in a tunnel. Like you don't really know which path to take. If I take this class, it's going to put me here. And if I don't make, and there's just so many decisions. And sometimes just enjoying that process, like when I look back over the past 15 years, 20 years, 25 years of my life, so many steps that I took, I had zero idea that they would be useful and bring me to where I am today. Working and watching people run businesses, learning other languages that I may use in my day to day practice, just different things that I never thought I would use by just sort of diversifying my skills. So not only focusing on like what you do, but becoming well-rounded as a person, and then enjoying the sort of joy of like being curious and learning other things, I think helps make the day to day tolerable and then the path and the journey just enjoyable.
I love that. Thank you for all sharing your insight there. I think um, the fact that students are unsure, but it helps a lot to hear these different paths because each of you are walking such a different pathway through your experience in healthcare. And I know, and this is more targeted to Dr. Nikki. We hear so many students who are like, I'm going to prep and take the MCAT one day, and I want to go to med school. but not sure, like knowing that it's going to be hard, but not really sure what that actual commitment looks like. So anything you can think about in terms of sharing, how did you stay committed to such a rigorous pathway, like not only med school, but your entire process of actually becoming a surgeon and the work that you're doing now? So anything you can share with students in terms of like your trajectory and how you sort of made yourself stay the course.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say about picking or figuring out where you want to go, in medicine there are so many different options. I think that my kind of unsolicited advice, but I guess right now it's solicited, is to maybe think about what you want your life to look like. It's really easy to say, I want to be, let's say, I want to be a trauma surgeon. And this was something that I struggled with. But ultimately, I realized I didn't want to do surgery at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I like trauma surgery. And if I could have done trauma surgery between 9 a.m. and like 4 p.m., that would have been amazing. But like people shoot each other in the middle of the night, or like you get into accidents because you were drunk at, whatever hour. So that was just something that helped to inform my choice. And I think that sometimes because the pathway to like being a doctor is so long, and you have to make so many decisions early, knowing kind of what where you could see yourself helps you to kind of keep your eye on the prize. How did I stay motivated? I think just knowing that my mom would always say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm.
And so really just kind of putting one foot in front of the other, in terms of, okay, this is the next milestone. This is the next milestone. And just, not trying to, what do they say, eat the whole elephant at once. I also found that being in environments that I enjoyed made it more tolerable. So, having friends and being in study groups or like doing things on your off time made the hard parts less. I mean, it didn't really make it less hard, but I remember when I was in medical school and it was probably like July or August. I had just started and it was Friday night, and they came over the loudspeaker like, "Hey, we'll be closing in 15 minutes." And I was like, "Holy crap. I've never shut down the library on a Friday night like in my life. This is a new life for me, right?" But like when you're studying with your friends, it hits different. Like it just it is not quite as isolating. So you get into a groove, you kind of keep the course. I also think that like mentorship is really important, and being able to see people who are doing what you want to do, seeing kind of what their life is like, seeing how what the fruits of the labor look like, that's helpful. I sort of joke. That I technically went to the 26th grade. So I know there's some folks who are still in high school on this call. But it was to the 12th grade of traditional school, then 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school. Surgery residency is 5 years, and my hand surgery fellowship was an additional year. So it's a long time. I'm not gonna lie. But I have friends from every stage of the process. I enjoyed it. So I don't know, maybe I'm a crazy person, but I think it's worth it.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. And I just had one quick follow-up question. Dr. Nikki, you had mentioned mentorship as a key aspect that sort of helped your trajectory. And this goes for all of our panelists. If you can share any insight into if you had mentors, how did you attain your mentors? How did you keep them engaged and interact with them? Any insight into that would be great. Be grateful to hear.
Yeah, I'll start off. So I've had, several mentors along the way who've helped me at different phases. I think mentorship is interesting because it really should be a two-way street. You want to be enriching your mentor as they are enriching you. I had my mentor that kind of got me into hand surgery, who was a hand surgeon. He was, I keep saying fun, and I really wish I had other words, but he seemed to enjoy life. There were things that he did outside of work. He had a pretty regular schedule. So I saw a lot of aspects of what I wanted, and latched on to that. I had another mentor who helped me through getting from medical school into residency, who really kind of helped me with the soft skills, learning about how to present yourself, what is expected, but nobody's going to tell you, how to figure out how to navigate and show up in a world that's not built for you. And the rigidity of the structure gets a little bit worse and worse the further that you go. What I mean by that is going from undergrad, there's more of an emphasis on like finding yourself and being who you are, and then you go from medical school to residency, and you kind of have to like fit into the white male world. And I'm anything but that, but how navigating how to be that, how to be me, but fit myself and be successful in that world. So anyway, I had a mentor who was really just wonderful at helping with that, and that was someone that was passionate about the work, and so people knew her as someone who was useful in that space, and I kind of latched onto her. So yeah, I think how do you find the mentor? How do you maintain the relationship? Is that you see the value in it, and then you put in the effort to make those relationships work, and to be present and to be engaged, and make it a two-way street.
And then next thing you know, you're a mentor, right, Nikki? Like that's amazing. Right? People pour into you and then here you are, right? Cup full. So, oh, go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, and I was going to say sometimes too that it's so beautiful when you get to finally find those mentors that can pour into you. And sometimes when you're starting, you may look around or come from a place where you don't have any mentors, or you are like, I'm the first person in my family to ever go to college. So a lot of times you may not have a mentor, but if you can have someone that believes in you, if you have a friend group that is not sort of pulling you down but encouraging you, you can lean into those relationships to sort of get you through, because you might have imposter syndrome while you're sort of, figuring out what you want to do and where you want to go. But if you just have a few people that will pour into you, they may not be what a mentor looks like at the moment, but eventually you will get to a point where you will have people that will reach back and they'll start to pull you along. And then eventually you will be that person bringing other people up.
That two-way street.
One thing I will add on, just to add on to what both Dr. Nikki and Ashley just shared, mentors are very key. I have one now, right? I do want to call out sponsorship too, though, right? And so in my previous career, I wanted a sponsor because I was trying to promote in that career. And I literally went to someone that I respected greatly. His name is Dr. Pridar Oregio. And he was our medical director at the time for the region that I was in. And I said, listen, I want a sponsor. And let me tell you what that means, right? That means you're at tables that I'm not at. You're sitting in seats that I won't ever walk through those doors. When you're there, tell them about me. You see the great work I do. Like my goal is to go here within this organization. But I need people like you to remember me when you're in those rooms. And he did, right? So a year later, I was promoted. I did end up leaving the organization because I said, you don't have to stay forever like my dad, right? Because I had an opportunity. for a greater pay, greater opportunity, expanded my global leadership. But mentorship is key. I have a mentor now. There's just a difference between that sponsor and that mentor. And there's a time when we should not be modest, where we should be very clear on other people do it. All right. I say this to the people, to my mentees now, don't be modest, because the people that come to me saying, hey, this is my career path, how are you going to help me, typically don't look like me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain expectation, and they will be very clear on what they want. It's important that we do the same.
Right. And I think that's like a gem that you just noted, Shay, is that sometimes, even though we might be more comfortable interacting with certain people, that might not be your mentor, right? And it's great if you're able to find that, but being able to seek out mentorship and sponsorship sometimes in rooms and not necessarily like in places that you're comfortable. And also, I think for our students, that important piece of thinking about what you're looking to get out of mentorship and being able to advocate for that. So it might not be as direct as Shay had noted as a student who is in college, maybe seeking out your first mentor, but mentally knowing like what you're looking to get out of that relationship and being able to potentially talk to a potential mentor in terms of like what your goals are and what type of interaction you're looking to foster in those conversations with them. I know Sine, you had your hand up earlier, so I want to give you an opportunity to unmute and ask your question.
Okay, yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Senai.
Sine. Sorry about that, Sine.
No problem, no problem. But I had two questions. It was I you earlier Dr. Perez said that you need to, and more than one person said it, but basically said that you want to be enriching your mentor as they are enriching you. And I didn't, a couple of people talked about it after, but I didn't really, I don't think I have a clear grasp on what that means. And then my second question was mentor versus sponsorship. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that?
You want to take the first one, Dr. Nikki?
Sure. So it sort of depends on what you're looking for um, in the mentor-mentee relationship. Oftentimes, I'll speak from my experience, right? So in medicine, you may need research opportunities, and being able to saying that you want a research mentor, for example. Well, you also have to do the work. You have to do the research. You have to bring the things to the table. They can help support you and they can teach you about the process, but you also have to be the diligent worker who is going to make putting out more publications easier. You also want to, you don't necessarily want the relationship to be one-sided, in which they are always reaching out to you, always trying to ask you what you need, how can they help you. You can present yourself as someone who's super eager and you want to learn about their field. Would it be possible for me to come and like help you in the office, or how can I be helpful to you? Being engaged in more of like, not consuming everything, but also providing like enrichment as well. When being prepared helps with that, where you can have a meaningful dialogue with them about something you've read, something that they may not even know about, or something that they've seen. Having conversations with students where the student seems invested and interested and knowledgeable is much more enriching versus me like regurgitating the knowledge I have.
Great question and great response. Because, I remember we talked about this a little bit with our guest, Gabe Lamelli from LinkedIn. No one wants to have a relationship with someone where it's always, what can you do for me, right? And it doesn't feel symbiotic. So, thanks for reinforcing that, Nikki. Oh, go ahead, Shay. I know you were going to take the second question.
I was just going to take, so now I had a question in regards to the difference between a mentor and just a sponsor. And I think it's a valid question because
Yep.
sometimes the lines can get blurred. So great question. When you think of a mentor, think of an advisor, right? When you think of a sponsor, you think of an advocate.
Mhm.
Okay. If you're thinking of a mentor, you think of a coach. But if you're thinking of a sponsor, you want to think of a champion. And so with my sponsor, with Dr. Prita Reggie, I was very clear that I was looking for a promotion. Okay. I was clear. That was a moment where I was like, I'm going for what I want. And he sat in rooms where he could advocate. He can be a champion to say, I've seen her work, I've seen her improvements, I've seen millions of dollars be improved. We've seen patients improve in diabetes care, whatever the case may be. Tell the folks or talk to when you know of an opportunity, let folks know about that. Mentorship is more so guide me in this position that I'm in now. Coach me. You've been in a role similar. You see what I don't see. Maybe my mentor now is one of our SVPs over operational excellence. That's a goal of mine, right? Now I appreciate my time with her because she just gives advice, right? She sees me in meetings, we travel together, but she really takes the time to teach, if you will, Sanaa. So does that help just define the difference? Okay.
I will say in like I don't want to say traditional medicine because that's not really the word, but like in the pathway through medical school, you can often find both in one person. And sometimes it's not always the case that they are two different people, but in the process from undergrad to medical school, from medical school to residency, residency to potentially fellowship and beyond, there may be people that wind up being your mentors who have direct decision making capability on if you get the residency spot, if you get the spot in medical school. And so having those people who are willing to directly advocate for you is helpful, but it's not always the same person. Did that create more questions than answers?
It's not always the same person. I think maybe
I'm saying it can be the same person. The mentor and the advocate can be the same person in certain scenarios. Sometimes
okay.
it's not.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. Thank
I
you.
see the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Um, Perfect. And I know we're running up on time, folks, and a couple of folks joined us a little late, but I know that there's some questions in the chat as well. Do you folks, anyone have any advice for a student who's considering a career in mental health? Something that we can give them any advice for?
Yeah. I would say the mental health field is pretty broad. So it would sort of, there's so many pathways you could take. If you go to medical school and become a psychiatrist, you could become a psychologist, you could become a family therapist, you could work with pediatrics, you could do so many different things. And so I think maybe for you, finding opportunities that you can perhaps volunteer or sort of start to spend time in some of those different clinical roles so that you can see what really calls you. And then you can train and create a plan so that you can sort of obtain that career because they're very different and it just really depends on what would serve you.
I also think that trying to keep your options open, so doing things that give you the most amount of options. Like, let's say you're still an undergrad and you're pretty sure you want to go to medical school, so you're pre med and you think that like only studying for your pre med classes is really helpful. Well, trying to like make sure you do well on everything so you have a bunch of different options, or going somewhere that would give you the opportunity to get your feet wet in a bunch of different fields so you're not, if you change your mind, if you decide to just go into, or if you decide to into psychiatry versus social work, you have a wide diversity of background so that you can kind of see where you fit in and go from there.
Great. Thank you for that. I see one last question that popped up in the chat. So I want to address Kiana's question in terms of advice for anyone wanting to get in on the administrative side of healthcare.
So I'm technically Kiana on the administrative side of healthcare, but it's so broad. Similar to what Dr. Ashley was saying, that the genre is, you have multiple opportunities for it. And oftentimes when folks have, I'll say for me, I thought of healthcare, I thought of a nurse and a doctor. Okay. I didn't know how vast and how important data was, right? I didn't know how much healthcare organizations fight insurance companies to pay them what they are should be paid for the services they provide. Like, I didn't know that there was like this improvements as it relates to operations. It's so vast. I would say see what you find an interest and passion in for that administrative side, what's tickling your fancy. I like to see myself as what is the lady name? I never watched this. She was had an affair with the president, and she was an amazing lawyer. What was her name?
Monica Lewinsky?
No, God, no.
Oh,
I'm like, is that who you're talking about? She said an
Olivia.
affair
No,
with the
Olivia
who?
Pope.
With the
Scandal.
president?
Scandal.
Yeah,
Yeah, Olivia Pope.
Scandal.
You're talking about Olivia Pope? I
Scandal.
was almost there. I was like, I know she can't be talking about. Are
right.
we talking about Olivia?
So I never watched it. I don't watch a lot of TV, but all my family and friends was watching it, right? And so I was stuck on a long flight, and I watched like the first couple of episodes for a season. And I found myself feeling like, wow, that I like her and what she does. I'm not far from an attorney. But fixing issues is what I do at work, right? And so I so if we're looking at closing gaps at $50 million, like people knock on my door for that, right? So in my own right, I feel like Olivia Pope. I can use her suits and things, but just see what it is that where you find that passion. But it's the genre is massive, and if you want to talk more about that, Kiana, I'm happy to.
Thank you so much for saying that, and just in general, right? I think students are asking these very specific questions because we're representative, right? Not just on our panel, but in the room are so many hopes and dreams and goals that folks want to achieve. So thank you so much to our panel, and we always like to end with. Again, we've got our students. Everyone is a student in their own way, right? Whether it's high school or college. And they need gems, they need advice, they need these reasons to keep going, right? So if each of you can just kind of remember back to when you were this age and what you needed to hear, right? And if you can just kind of frame that as your final thoughts for our folks here.
I'll go. I think that sometimes it's easy to see the world that you want to be in and not necessarily what you bring to that world and how you can see yourself fully flourishing. Um, I I'm not sure if Cheryl and Ashley have heard this story before, but this is one of my like why cultural competency matters. I was in the trauma bay and we had a patient come in who was where I think most people on this call are at least in college or have some exposure to college, but he had on purple fatigue pants and he had on a solid purple t shirt and he was wearing gold boots. So to me, that meant something. I already knew that he likely was associated with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, right? Like I made that assumption, but that was something that I only made in that room. I don't think anybody else did. Now, this man was clearly intoxicated and had been involved in an accident, and they were asking him questions, and he was barking in response. Again, that confirmed my suspicions. And they thought he had a head injury and like maybe thought he was an animal. And so we're getting ready to put him on the ventilator because he clearly was so out of his mind he couldn't speak. And I was like, wait. No, he's just a drunk Q, right? And I like joke about that. But I brought something to that space that potentially saved that man a whole lot of complications. And I realized that, like, my experiences are valuable. My cultural background enriches others. And so, knowing what you bring to every space, whether it is mental health, whether it is, surgery, that compassion, that empathy, that experience is worthwhile. So, just envision yourself in this space. Don't just envision the space that you're going to try and fit into.
Thanks for saying that.
I love that story. And Nikki, you've never told me that.
Yeah, that's rich. That was rich. My husband is a Q, so he's over there barking. I'm grateful that I was muted. So that was rich, Nikki. I would say I was trying to figure it out, and I found myself at times trying to fit, right?
Mm.
Fit the look, fit the talk. Um, and I realized when I just was my own self, I felt freer. It wasn't a pretend. The knowledge that I knew came to me easier. It wasn't a facade. So now I bring this whole natural hair to wherever boardroom I'm going to, right? Or I I know how to turn it on and off, right? But I think it is important that you don't minimize who you really are in whatever space this is for you. There is something that's very authentic and needed, like what Dr. Nikki
Mhm.
just said. I remember hearing a similar story where there was a lady and she was patting her scalp, right, like this. And so same thing, they wanted to get her evaluated. They was worried about her. I can't remember why she was in the hospital, but the nurse that was there know what that means. It's her scalp is itching and she can't get up under the tracks, right? So it's important that we show up in these spaces, because if we don't, who's showing up for us? And if we look at the numbers and we look at the gaps and disparity of care, it's important that we show up our whole 100%
Yep.
authentic self every time, right? Don't fit, be you. And you have, that comes with some wisdom. But make sure that you can at least be yourself in those spaces, and people appreciate that, even if it makes them uncomfortable. I'm not in the business of making them comfortable.
And we're glad for it.
Dr. Ashley, it's you for your final thought.
I didn't have anything better to add than what these two lovely ladies added in terms of being yourself. It just made me think of when you're younger, the goal is always to sort of fit in. No one wants to be different from their friends. But as you go through life, all of those things that make you different are really what make your experience so unique. And so, even in like Lachey just said, people love to see they can learn from who you are. So you don't have to, it's hard when you're so competitive and everyone's trying to like, study the same stuff and you're like in these rooms and there's a lot of sameness. But when you actually get out there working, what you bring is valuable. So don't try to like be the square in the circle. Just be who you are and you can still move in these spaces and get to where you're going.
I love that. And thank you all for reaffirming who you are, but who our students are. It's so important to hear these conversations. So huge round of applause for a virtual round of applause for
Yay.
our panelists today, for spending our time with us and just sharing this insider knowledge. If you could all just take a moment to fill out any feedback that you have for today's session, please scan the QR code. As you all know, assessment is what keeps this all going. So please share your thoughts and feedback so that we can just know your thoughts and how you felt about today's session. But thank you for being engaged and showing up and participating in today's session. Really hoping that you're walking away with some great insight in terms of the healthcare field, whether you were considering it or not considering it, but just being able to hear from Black leaders is important. So thank you for being here. Also want to highlight, if you haven't already registered for our next session coming up on February 7th, this is going to be another exciting session. As you all remember, we did part one, that LinkedIn conversation with Gabe Lamelli. This will be part two, where we will be doing going further into the LinkedIn conversation, but also doing a live demo, so you can get some real insight in terms of how you can be using a lot of the skill sets that we've been learning directly within LinkedIn. Then we're going to have an opportunity to hear from two additional panelists, from Cindy Holmes, who's the Director of Finance, and then from Yatunde, who is a research analyst at Econic Partners. So please make sure you scan the QR code to register for that one. Ivana, do you want
Yep,
to?
and yeah, I was gonna say, and while we're there registering, and the advice that all of us heard, right, from our panelists was to put yourselves out there more, to trust the process, right, to listen to your mentors. All of that starts to really culminate into our Hire in Action event, where, as we've been emailing you folks, you'll get an opportunity to have a mock interview with one of our mentors. And as you can see, right, they're very much willing to give you great advice, great feedback, but also give you the opportunity to practice, right, and to get more comfortable in these spaces, and being able to hone your skills. So please, if you've seen your emails, make sure you sign up. But we've also put the QR here for you guys to go ahead and schedule. Part of that is getting us your resume. So putting back out there the resume one-on-one sessions that we've been offering, where our career specialist has been able to help students with resumes, cover letters, all of those pieces, and then help you take a look at what would be the best time for you to sign up for one of those mock interviews. So make sure that you get your resume looked at, and that you also sign up for one of those sessions.
If you haven't already, just all the reminders, please make sure you are following us on YouTube. Today's session will be posted to our YouTube channel. You'll have the opportunity to look back on previous sessions and just stay connected to InnovateHer as a whole. Lots of great conversations going on. So make sure, if you've missed one or if you want to go back and review one that we've previously done, the YouTube link is there.
I know someone asked me, can they send this to their sister? I was like, yes, you can. So we'll make sure to put this on our YouTube so you guys can go ahead and share that within your networks. All right.
And right at, well, we're just a little bit over time, but I know a few of you joined late. So again, thank you for being here on a Thursday evening with us. We'll be sure to send out the recording. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Happy Thursday. Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks,
Take care.
folks.
Bye bye.